Hi, everybody. Dennis Allen with the Disciple Dilemma. Some of you are going to be very interested. Some of you are going to be very frustrated with our guest today because, as they say sometimes in literature, he is a bull who brings his own china shop with him. I think that was Boswell talking about Johnson. But in this case, it's David French, New York Times columnist and best-selling author, constitutional litigator, Iraqi war veteran, most importantly, a follower of Jesus Christ. David and his family have been under attack by people at Christian school, in church, in the public sphere, not for the ideas. These are threats against the family. That's not how disciples live. I want you to hear these several parts of these interviews today, and I hope that you'll take away the idea that in David French is someone who wants to talk about ideas, as Christians should be willing to reason together instead of sniping from the sidelines and being unwilling to actually have the conversation face to face. We're having that conversation face to face. I like this guy. Don't buy everything that he's into. He won't buy everything I'm into, but he's a follower. He's a disciple, and he's helping us break the disciple dilemma. Here we go. Folks, here we are on the disciple dilemma. We were just gossiping about the guest, but I've just got to whine one more time. I have in one frame of this picture a Harvard-trained lawyer who is an Iraqi war vet. I've got a Princeton theologian who's cornered me on another side, and I have got a Worcester Poly manufacturing engineering PhD. So I'm totally outgunned, but my role is to be the Luddite today. David French, welcome to the disciple dilemma.
Well, thanks for having me. And I suddenly feel undereducated when you went through everyone else's credentials.
David, none of us have been asked to run for president other than
Oh,
you.
gosh.
That's right.
I will tell you that that is not all it's cracked up to be. That is a lot less fun than you might think.
I share David's experience of having been ousted by, canceled by, not just a former denomination, but real friends. And so I resonate with what he's experiencing. I have a little bit different approach in terms of how I've responded and I find God faithful. I know David does too, but I also think that his experience because of the attacks on his family is somewhat unique. Like things have really changed, even in just the last 20 or 25 years in terms of when we throw somebody out of a Christian community, how we treat them. And so I think that it's important for all of us to not just hear his story, but talk about how we as Christians need to be responding.
I knew there might be some people. We might have some interesting conversations and some debates, over a meal, whatever. But I did not think it would sort of fundamentally alter my relationship with my own church. How wrong was I? And it was in an interesting way. And very, very disturbing. So I would put it like this. There was a segment of very close friends and pastors who were very supportive of me, and Nancy and my family, even if we disagreed. They're very supportive, loving, supportive, close friends, loving, supportive. Some of them voted for Trump. Some of them didn't. Most of my family voted for Trump. Most of my friends voted for Trump, and we all love each other. And that worked out exactly the way that I thought it would. We love each other. Our Christianity was A, B, C, D, E, and F. Our love of SEC football was G, politics was down the list. And so we could easily tolerate political disagreements across a lot of love and respect. And then there was a large group of people who didn't care one way or the other. They're not engaged. But then there was a third group of people who were very, 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 very angry. And they began to lash out at us in ways that, even though pastors tried to protect us from it, and sometimes even disciplined, one person in our church was even disciplined because he confronted me over not supporting Trump at communion. Then But we began to have a cascade of really horrible incidents at church or at the Christian school where my kids went, and including gross racism. So, for example, my youngest daughter is adopted from Ethiopia, and we had a church tell my wife, why couldn't you adopt from, a teacher told my son, what'd you get your sister for? A loaf of bread? Because we know that's all that it takes, to get folks, she's adopted from Ethiopia. Horrible. Classmates saying to our daughter, slavery was good because I'm glad it's over, but slavery is what allowed you people to learn how to live in America. Like things like this, combined with purely political stuff, such as an elder angrily confronting us over not supporting Trump. And when my wife pushed back, he turns to me and says, you need to get your wife in line. People standing up. When I would walk into a room, there was a family that stood up and turned their backs to us rather than look at us. When I was out of town, it was weirdly only men would, multiple occasions, would come up to my wife and confront her about my writing. Sometimes quoting Doug Wilson, from the Cross Politic crew, which, by the way, I was on a Cross Politic podcast once. That didn't go well. And then it was friendly, it was amicable, but it was a little weird. And so what began to happen was that our church just was not hospitable for us anymore. It wasn't that the pastors turned against us. The pastors were great. I love each of my PCA pastors. I have love and respect for. It wasn't that our close friends turned on us. But it's difficult to describe a feeling of driving into church and not knowing if somebody's going to confront your wife, if somebody's going to confront you, dropping your kids off at the church school and not knowing whether your daughter's going to hear the N-word directed in her direction. I mean, there were actual teachers who used the N-word to describe the very few Black, students in this school. And, when that is going on, we reached a point where we realized it's very hard for us to worship in peace. And we talked about some of the larger harassment. I haven't even touched that. Like ever since I came out against Trump, we've been suffering from periodic death threats, cyber harassment, bomb threats. Police have been to the house many times. It's been hard. We've been doxxed by white nationalists. It's been really difficult. And so we needed church as a refuge more than even normal, and church wasn't. We were driving to church nervous if somebody was going to confront us. And again, it was not most people. I just want to make that super clear. This is being misinterpreted by a lot of people. I've even said when I write about it, I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but it just wasn't, we couldn't feel like we could worship or receive communion in peace any longer. And so we left and went to a different church, a wonderful multi-ethnic evangelical church in Nashville that's just marvelous. And we're still close with our pastor from our former church. We love our pastor at our current church. But it was a very painful, hard decision. And one that I did not write about and say, I'm leaving the PCA. I didn't torch the PCA. We just went to a different church. And so that's sort of a background of what happened. And this is very much related to, there are a lot of people who see their partisan politics as an absolute natural extension of their Christianity. So that if you disagree with them on partisan politics, they receive it as if you're departing from the faith because they have so closely tied their political positions on any number of issues to their faith identity. And so even though I could just agree with all the creeds and the Westminster Confession, I should add, I do not like the drive-bys against Catholics in the Westminster Confession.
Amen.
On other points, largely the Westminster Confession, I think, is really solid. But you could agree on the creeds, the confessions, etc. But if you didn't agree on how the state would deploy its power, then they were calling your faith into question. And that was new for me. I had not ever experienced that, ever. And it created a real, and again, not a majority, but it created a persistent experience that made it difficult to go to church and feel like we could worship in peace.
You had about 2 weeks ago one more adventure. I read your article in the Times.
Yeah. So as you can tell from me talking about this stuff, I have been a subject of a lot of intense criticism. But not just on the left, the right, by the way. The left, when I was hired by the New York Times, there were public statements denouncing me. There were open letters denouncing me. I think at 2 universities recently that I've gone to go speak, there's been an effort to either boycott my speech or have it canceled because of my beliefs about sexual morality, my traditional Christian beliefs about sexual morality, that sex is reserved for marriage between a man and a woman in a covenant lifelong marriage. And so there's a lot of people on the left who really don't like that. And they also really don't like that I'm pro-life, that I wanted Roe overturned and that I supported the Dobbs decision. And I've written about that very publicly. There's a lot of people on the left who really don't like my position on some aspects of trans issues. So for example, I wrote against biological male participation in female sports in the Times, and a lot of people got angry about that. So I have been in the crosshairs from the left and the right. And so before the PCA General Assembly, which is a gathering of PCA elders, leaders, one of my friends who's still in the PCA, close friend, dear friend, reached out and said, hey, would you participate in a discussion about how to deal with our polarized times? And part of the reason why I was asked is because I have, in fact, received a lot of criticism from the left and the right. People have tried to get me fired from the left and the right. People have threatened me from the left and the right. I could go. And so part of the goal is, and it made a lot of sense in my mind, because who do you want to hear from about dealing with polarized times? Is it somebody that just gets along with everybody? Or is it somebody who's really confronted a lot of problems related to our polarization? And so I said yes. But I said 2 things. I'm not in the PCA anymore. So that was, and you also know that a lot of people don't like me, including in the PCA. And that was, internally, that was fine. We understand that. We know that. And then the announcement came that I was going to be on the panel, and the backlash came that I completely expected, totally not surprising at all. Nothing about it was surprising or frankly interesting to me. I've been through it 100 times before. But the PCA really recoiled. And about 5 or 6 days later, they canceled the whole panel. And then one of the PCA officials put out a statement like throwing me under the bus. Had I known about what I've written or how it's been interpreted, the clear implication was he never would have put me on the panel. And I was thinking, you've actually been on Zooms where I've talked. And what do you mean, had you known what I've written? I don't write like on a private listserv. I write in the New York Times. I've written in the Atlantic and the Dispatch, and it's very public. And it was just, so then that led to a whole nother round of, look what we did. We got, David, the PCA is coming around. It's realizing the danger of David French. And so I trended on Twitter when it was announced. I trended on Twitter when I was disinvited and the panel was canceled. And then I wrote my piece a week and a half or so ago and then trended on Twitter again, which, by the way, if you've never trended on Twitter, do not covet that. That is never good. It's never good. It is always an occasion where, if you just open the app, it's just endless screaming. You just don't even look at it. It's bad for your soul. There's so much, personal insults and everything. But so anyway, that's the story in a nutshell.
Would you help the church think more about discipleship? Would you help us get the conversation started to talk about the biblical discipleship Jesus gave us? Please follow us. Our website, www.thediscipledilemma.com. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and all the RSS feeds. If you'd follow or like us, you'll help us get leverage in the digital marketplace to talk about the fact that discipleship needs to be talked about. And as always, folks, thanks for listening.